Good afternoon, scientists. All right. Let's try that again. Good afternoon, scientists. That's great, and welcome to everyone around the world who's streaming this. My name is Phil. I'm the director of CityScience, and we transform teaching by using the city as a teaching tool. So buildings, bridges, parks, waterfronts are all great ways to learn science. And everything you've seen today are all real-world applications of science. So all the way down to the smallest LED on a traffic light, there's something to be learned. The smallest amphibian that may be mating in your classroom as we speak. This is great. So as you can see from our logo, we're excited. We want kids to have ideas, and we want them to be excited about those ideas at CityScience. And we've been really lucky. We've been working with a group called the Lowline, and they're creating a one-of-a-kind park here in New York City. And they have something called a lab. Everybody here knows what a lab is, right? Yeah. Great. It's a great place to learn. It's a great place to try new things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to this project and some of the science behind it and how kids just like yourself have participated in shaping the future of this park. So this is a view of Manhattan looking up the island, and where this green space is on the Lower East Side. And what we have is we have an underground trolley terminal. Trolleys would come across the Williamsburg Bridge. They would drop their people off, and they'd go underground, and it's an area underneath Delancey Street in Manhattan that's bigger than a football field. It's been abandoned since 1948 because, unfortunately, we're not using streetcars anymore. There's a group called the Lowline. You can see their name and logo on the bottom, and they're envisioning a future public space. So if you're into science, technology, engineering, and math, I'm going to show you dozens of ways and dozens of professionals who are contributing to this park. But I always like to start with this slide because this is an artistic rendering of what the park might look like. So there's lots of room for art in STEM.
Five years ago, we hatched a crazy plan to create the world's first underground park, the Lowline. The core feature of the Lowline is that we can take natural sunlight, send it underground, and use that to grow stuff. With this natural sunlight, we can take an abandoned trolley terminal, which is a football field-sized piece of New York City history, and transform it into a vibrant public space filled with plants and trees, and to create something unlike anything the world has ever seen before.
The Lowline is more than a cool idea. It's a plan to revitalize and enhance an entire neighborhood.
All we're doing is revealing something which has been there longer than most of the people in the area, and we're just re-exposing it for people to see.
In 2012, our community began our very first Kickstarter campaign.
Since then, we've refined our solar technology, developed a clear method to bring sunlight underground, and engage with local residents to collectively imagine how the Lowline can best serve our community.
So we're coming to you at Kickstarter again to help us move the Lowline closer to reality. We're going to build a bigger, badder, more mind-blowing tech prototype in the form of the Lowline Lab.
We're partnering with some of the best design minds in the world to create a living green space to show how brilliant underground lighting can be. And then we'll run a series of long-term experiments which will show us what we can do in underground spaces throughout the world.
Help us show the world that with new solar technology, we can reimagine the underground, shine a light on New York City history, and create a new, beautiful public space.
So I think I've had one of the best jobs for the last 6 months. I've been fortunate, and our entire staff has been fortunate, to reach out and work with all the engineers, botanists, horticulturalists, landscape designers, lighting designers, maintenance crews that have made the Lowline a reality. This is a place you can visit, and I'll tell you more about how you can visit and when you can visit at the end. But CityScience has been running the Young Designers program since the fall, and we've served 2,500 kids, and those 2,500 kids have produced over 5,000 ideas for what this underground park could have and how it could be better. So what we do in a Young Designers program is we explore the key principles and the science behind making an underground park, the first in the world. So in the upper left, you can see a lot of plant life and horticulture. These students are examining solar collection systems. Down in the left, they're looking at wavelengths and learning about the full spectrum of light. And is anyone in the room familiar with the engineering design process? It's similar to the scientific process, but it is different. Think of it as a clock. When you start at 12 o'clock, you're asking questions and you're trying to solve the world's problems. You're imagining what these solutions look like, you're making a plan, you're creating and building models and prototypes, and then you're improving on those. The way I like to encourage you to think about it as in terms of your iPhone. Before iPhone 6 was iPhone 5 and 4 and 3. And every time they make an iPhone better, they go around that circle. Same with your video games, same with the cars we drive. The engineering design process is a problem-solving process. Light in architecture has been a problem for a long time. And here in New York City, if you're familiar with the tenements, there were really rough housing conditions. And in 1901, the city of New York passed a law that tenements had to be designed and apartment buildings had to be designed in a way to let fresh light and fresh air into all apartments. This little guy in the corner was lucky. He had a window. But there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of families who had windowless apartments. Daylighting in New York City also can be seen on our sidewalks. Have you ever walked down the sidewalk and seen small pieces of glass, about the size, a little bit bigger than a quarter? Well, these were to illuminate the vaults underneath the sidewalk. So here's your horse, here's your wagon, and underneath the sidewalk a lot of times is a vault. And this is a guy who has over 150 patents. He's a New Yorker, Thaddeus Hyatt. He might have been the original hipster if he lived in Williamsburg. And this patent that you see on the left is one of his that is a sidewalk lens. And the shape at the bottom of the lens, when the sunlight comes in through the top, it spreads out on the bottom. He got a lot of these ideas from Europe, where he saw similar technologies. Today, you can see solar daylighting when you go to the Fulton Street Transit Station in Lower Manhattan. So you can see the building on the lower left with its large conical roof, designed by Arup, who, by the way, is one of today's sponsors, and one of the firms that helps the Lowline with its mechanical and structural engineering plans. And what they've done is they've been a part of a large team that designed this conical structure that brings daylight in and shines it into parts of the subway platforms that wouldn't get direct light otherwise. So we've been going through the engineering design process about daylighting and bringing sunlight into dark spaces in New York City for a long time. And this is really the future of that at the Lowline. So we're testing a daylighting technology. And up on the top, to the left and right of A, is a heliostat and a large solar collector. And that sunshine is coming straight down to around D, E, and F. And the green is the plant life. So I'm going to show you how this works and some of the science behind it. This is a rooftop collection system. It was designed by a group out of South Korea named Sun Portal. And if you see this orange disc in the shiny center, it's very, very much like a satellite TV dish. Satellite TV dish is collecting in the programs you want to watch. This is collecting sunlight, and it's condensing it. And you can also see a large mirror. This is called the heliostat. And this heliostat follows the sun. Now, of course, the sun doesn't move, but as the Earth rotates, it seems like it moves. And the heliostat is reflecting light into this parabola. So the geometry of a parabola, or the geometry of a satellite dish, or the geometry of a solar collector is really neat. I kind of think of it like a Steph Curry jump shot. So if you're a basketball fan, the guy can hardly miss. All the sunlight that's coming in this direction, hitting that green parabola, bounces to one point, and it focuses it all on one point. So there's geometry. And when light is focused, you can also focus it through lenses. So you see a convex lens at the top, and it has a particular focal length. And when the light is focused at that center point, after that, it'll start to widen out again. So the Lowline uses a lot of technology to focus light. And then when light is focused, like a laser, you can bend it or reflect it using mirrors around a tree, around a building, because those rooftop collection systems are actually collecting light on top of skyscrapers and bouncing it and shooting it underground. So why do we do all this? What is so special about our sun? Well, one thing, it's a free renewable resource. So it's a great way to light a park. But another important piece of this technology is so that we can get the full rainbow or the full visible spectrum of light underground. Because as all of you know, it's really important to have good light to grow your plants. So I like to point out that the visible spectrum of light is only a part of a much longer and more complex system of waves, which involve gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet rays, all the way down to the other end of FM, TV, and AM radio. So we're doing this. We're collecting natural sunlight because plants need it to grow so we can build a new kind of park. And we're building an underground landscape. So in order to do that, we need to know a lot about horticulture. So the Brooklyn Botanic Garden has dedicated and donated plants. And there's a great woman, her name is Signe Nielsen at Matthews Nielsen Landscape Architecture here in Manhattan. She's a world-famous landscape architect, and this is a picture of her original concept plan. You can't see it, but every one of those little shapes has a number inside of it, and that corresponds to a different type of plant. So if you like to plant the gardens in your classroom, how would you like to plant a football field underground? Landscape architecture is a great thing if you love sketching, if you love drawing. Here we start to see Signe's designs come into 3D, and she's starting to place particular plants on hillsides. And right now there's over 3,000 plants planted on the Lower East Side, and there's 50 different varieties of plants. And I like to point out that John Minnie Distinctive Landscapes is a very unique company here in New York City. Why is it unique? Because they only do indoor gardens, or they specialize, I should say, in doing indoor gardens. So it's more difficult to raise a plant sometimes inside than outside, and John Minnie and his team knows a lot about how to raise plants indoors. Another thing that plants do, as you know, is they clean the air. So why do you want plants in your underground park? Why do you need light to grow plants in your underground park? Because you want clean, fresh air in this former trolley terminal. One of the things that I find really interesting about science is you look back in time and you find interesting reasons. So how do we measure light? Well, the reason why we call it a candle as the primary measurement of light is because that was the most predictable source of light hundreds of years ago. So when they talk about foot candles, a plant has a diet, and it's kind of like our diet of calories is how I think of it sometimes. We have to eat a certain number of calories each day. And if we eat too many, we grow obese, and if we eat too few, we would lose weight. Plants need the right amount of light, and they have evolved over thousands of years, millions of years sometimes, to a particular diet of light, and they call that a foot candle. So every single plant in that landscape is being targeted with a particular diet of light, and that's what the lab is in the process of learning about. Now, lighting design is not only for plants, because if people are going to be in the park, it has to be a fun and engaging place to be. So if you really look at the ceiling here, there's a lot of different light, and we have to diffuse the light and soften the light when it comes in. And the lighting partner hasn't been announced yet, but there's some really exciting plans that the Lowline has about a new company that's joining this team to build this park. You know, and when it comes to light, is light always the same all year round? When you leave school in the winter, it's pretty dark, right? And you're leaving school now, it's bright out. So that has to do with planetary movement. So we have to be aware of that, and we also have to bring artificial light in. Otherwise, we would have to close the park at 4 o'clock, on a Saturday afternoon in January. So this is a little bit fuzzy, but you can see all of the rainbows, or all of the visible spectrums of light, in light bulbs and fluorescent lights and LED lights. All 6 of these lights have a little bit different fingerprint or a little bit different visible spectrum of light. So when we're picking lights to put into the Lowline to augment or supplement a lack of daylight, we're trying to pick a light that really works well for these plants. So there's been 3 main objectives of the lab on the Lower East Side. The first one is to test and refine solar technology. This is the only place in the world that this technology exists right now and is being used to grow an indoor garden in this way. We're also developing a new field of subterranean horticulture. What types of plants will thrive in this ecosystem, in this environment? And we're also exploring new ways to connect to the local community. As I said earlier, 2,500 students have participated in the Young Designers program this year, and they've come up with over 5,000 great ideas on what to do with the park. The Lowline Lab is open, and it's on the Lower East Side of Manhattan through March 2017. It's free. You should bring a friend. It's open on weekends, in the afternoons primarily, and it's at 140 Essex Street, between Staten and Rivington. And you should really get involved, because all of you are changing the world with the projects that you're doing right now. And this is another way that you can change the world and shape the world and build the world's first underground park.